Tottenham 3, Chelsea 4, a fixture that generally doesn't disappoint, and it delivered yet again. We had almost absolutely everything in that match. I'm going to be breaking down exactly what happened, as well as what the win means for Chelsea and what the loss means for Spurs, and where does that leave Ange Postecoglou. For Chelsea, it was interesting that the fact that they decided to play with Moises Caicedo at right back, something that Enzo Maresca did do in the win against Aston Villa, which they beat them quite comprehensively. But this time, I don't think it quite worked. What they were trying to do was play Badiashile right, kind of out in that right channel, Cole in the centre, and Cucurella on the left. Moises Caicedo would try and come into midfield, and he would, help out Lavia and Fernandes, and that means that they would overload Tottenham in midfield, with Cole Palmer coming in, dropping in deep as well. That means that they could really, get the numbers advantage over that Spurs midfield, and it worked a little bit at times. But what really wasn't happening was they weren't being able to link up play, and Spurs' press in the first couple of minutes was really, really relentless, and that's what led to Cucurella ended up slipping twice, quite unfortunately, but it did mean that Spurs ended up going 2-0 in front. And the Spurs press in the opening minutes was really, really good. You could see here Dominic Solanke was pressing down Levi Colwill in the centre there, with Badiashile on the right side and Cucurella on the left-hand side. And as you can see, sometimes it's, the front three of Solanke, Brennan Johnson and Heung-min Son, but this time it's Solanke, Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson. And this time, as the ball goes to Cucurella, he ends up slipping, and it's very unfortunate. But let's be honest, I think Spurs on the counter-attack are a really, really good side, and so anyone in this position, you've got Brennan Johnson about to take the ball off Cucurella, you've got Solanke against Cole, and at the bottom of the screen, you've also got Heung-min Son up against Badiashile. 3v3, anyone Spurs are going to have anyone's number, really. And as the ball goes into the box from Brennan Johnson, it's really clever movement from Dominic Solanke to first of all go to the far post and then draw Colwill out that way, but then also finally to make the run across the front post, and that's where he gets the flick on, and that's how he ends up beating Robert Sanchez, who, not my favourite goalkeeper. I think I've made it pretty clear. But Spurs found themselves 1-0 up. And I think at this point, Spurs were probably the better side, and they did deserve it. And then as Chelsea are trying to play the ball out from the back, Cucurella ends up slipping again. And yeah, maybe the turning point in the game was the fact that Cucurella went to the touchline and changed his boots after this one. But again, he ends up slipping, and you just think to yourself, mate, what are you doing? This is such a big game. Get up, stay on your feet. But again, Spurs work it really, really well. But I do have to say, Dejan Kulusevski, who I've been really impressed with so far this season, and a little bit last season, but this season especially, he's really taken his game, I think, to the next level. And when he picks up the ball here, he's got a couple of options here. Either, first of all, pass it to Dominic Solanke, hope he can get a shot away or let him hold it up. Or you've also got Heung-min Son at the back post about to make a run. Maybe you can try to play the ball to him, maybe in the air. But Kulusevski arguably takes the hardest option of all three and decides to run with it, and ends up doing fantastically well. But I do have to question the Chelsea midfielders here. Because while Kulusevski does really, really well, Cole is in a decent position. Solanke and Heung-min Son in the box are both being marked pretty well. Lavia is in a decent position just behind me as well. You probably can't see him, but Cole Palmer is there marking that space, so there's not going to be any third man run. And the fact that Kulusevski is able to put the ball wrong foot the goalkeeper and put it into the near post, through the legs of Romeo Lavia, who I thought had a really good game. But at this moment, I did think the defending was a little bit poor, and Spurs found themselves 2-0 up. Yes, the game plan was working at this point from Ange Postecoglou. Yes, they were pressing Chelsea very high up. They're winning the ball back, but a little bit fortuitously. And I did think to myself, there's more goals in this game. Chelsea will come back, and they absolutely did. And this was the pivotal turning point in the match. No, I'm only joking. It probably helped the fact that Cucurella could stay on his feet and not just give the ball away carelessly. But I do think that, Spurs did deserve the lead at that point. But I do think that Chelsea's game plan and Enzo Maresca, what he was trying to do initially into the game, that did work. And then finally, when Chelsea stopped giving the ball away so cheaply, you were able to see that Chelsea were able to get into the game and then go on the front foot as well. That first half of football was absolutely frantic, and I did expect Spurs, when they went 2-0 up, to maybe be a little bit smarter about how they went about the game. And I think that's one of the big criticisms that Ange Postecoglou has to face in terms of the Spurs side, because they were still pressing, they were still doing really, really well, but then Chelsea grew into the game and they thought, you know what, we've got nothing to lose, we're already 2-0 down, and they started to play their stuff and started to play it really, really well. Badiashile, who I thought was a little bit uncomfortable playing, a left footer playing on the right hand side, and I've got a theory about that as well, because I think there's genuinely a lack of left footed centre backs, based on probability, because most people are right footed. So that means that the left footers are normally not used to playing on the right hand side, whereas right footers are used to playing on the left hand side. And I think this one, Badiashile really, really struggled out on the right hand side because his body position was all wrong. He was trying to play balls with his left foot, and the angle was just wrong, not quite getting there. But when it did work, and it did start to work a little bit, Son couldn't get near Badiashile, Solanke couldn't get near Cole, and Brennan Johnson couldn't get near Cucurella. But the reason why they were able to play the balls, because Enzo Fernandez started picking up the space here, just behind the Spurs midfield, who were pressing really high up. Kulusevski was pressing high on Lavia, Sarr was pressing high up on Caicedo, and Cole Palmer was drifting out to the right-hand side, and Bissouma was tasked with almost man-marking him out of the game, and that did leave a spare man in Enzo Fernandez. And the question was, could Chelsea play through the Spurs press and get the ball to him? Because if you could, then you were in. And they absolutely could, because Caicedo and Lavia, I know Lavia came off at the end of the first half, but these two are really, really working well. And they're looking really promising and really dangerously when they do play together. And I think they got away from from Sarr and Kulusevski far too easily. And I did think to myself that, these two as a double pivot could probably give most teams in world football a run for their money in terms of trying to break a press. Because the way the Barcelona kept out playing the ball to Caicedo, Cucurella was playing it to Lavia, they were just turning them. They were passing it in between each other back to the defenders or passing it forward. And the issue was when he got that ball to Enzo Fernandez, because he was a free man, he was a spare runner, and I think when he got it past this initial press, Cole Palmer was pushing a bit wide as well, so Bissouma tracking him out there. Fernandez had all this space, and this was the space that Chelsea exploited, and which led to them getting their first goal. Because with the Chelsea wide men staying high and wide, in this case Sancho on the other side, Pedro Neto as well, as soon as you got the ball, they had a little bit of time and space. But this is where I really want to talk about, the off-ball runners and maybe the freshness of the Chelsea players. Because I think with them playing the Conference League and not necessarily in the Champions League or Europa League, they're able to rotate their squad so impressively, that they could change the entire starting 11, and the players that are going to be playing on the pitch against Spurs, who Spurs are struggling a little bit with injuries at this moment, struggling a little bit with their form as well. They just look like a much fresher side, and that showed in the second half as well. But in this one, Jadon Sancho is on the ball running at that Spurs defence, and you can see from here Enzo Fernandez in that little pocket, the space I was talking about. Look at that space. Look at where the referee is, Anthony Taylor, in the amount of space he's in, right in front of the Spurs back line. That is criminal. That cannot be allowed to happen. But where's your defensive midfielder? It's Bissouma at the bottom of the screen in the middle next to Cole Palmer as well. He's so preoccupied with Palmer, he's vacating the space, and that's the space that Chelsea exploited. And we really need to highlight the off-the-ball work that the Chelsea players did here. You can see where Enzo Fernandez was in the last photo. Now look where he is. He's made a run. He's pulled away one of the defenders, so Jadon Sancho can drive into that. And now look at where Nicholas Jackson is at the moment. He's near the edge of the D, along with Mickey van der Ven, but he makes a decoy run as well. And that just opens up the space even more for Jadon Sancho to have a target on goal. And it was an absolutely wonderful strike from Sancho, edge of the box, just to get it past Fraser Forster and just nick it in off the post. But I do have to say, the Spurs defenders, Mickey van der Ven and Yves Bissouma here, just dangling a leg out in the hopes that it hit, they're not really committing their bodies to it. And I think that was something that I thought was really, really poor from the Spurs perspective, and Ange Postecoglou would be really disappointed with that. Now, I don't necessarily always agree with everything that Paul Merson said, but I was watching Sky, and I saw him at halftime talking about the game and saying that he was really, really confident that Chelsea were going to go on and win this game and come back into it. And I sat there thinking to myself, yeah, do you know what? I actually completely agree with you. And I was thinking to myself, why do I agree with that? Why do I think that Chelsea are going to come back into this game and do really, really well and go in and get 3 points? And I was thinking, do you know what? I just believe that the Chelsea squad, with the form they're in at the moment, compared to the Spurs side, and the way that, Chelsea got back into the game really massively worked, whereas necessarily Spurs were quite a little bit lucky in the fact that, Cucurella slipped twice. I did think to myself, yeah, Chelsea got the momentum. They have the better attackers as well, and I do expect them to go out in the second half and take this game by the scruff of the neck, and they did exactly that. But what surprised me was the fact that Enzo Maresca decided to make a tactical change at half-time. He took off Romeo Lavia, which I thought, was a little bit surprised, picked up a little bit of a knock on his head. It wasn't for that. It was tactical. He brought on Malo Gusto, and he went to a more traditional 4-2-3-1 with an actual right back at right back, because Malo Gusto, as soon as Heung-min Son came there, it meant that Barcelona was a lot more comfortable in the central areas. Cole actually ended up being the one to go to the right. Barcelona went to the left, and Cucurella was, still with Brennan Johnson, but with new boots, fresh boots, so he wasn't slipping around everywhere. And then what happened was, with Caicedo, alongside him came Enzo Fernandez. And again, like I talk about Caicedo and Lavia, this time Caicedo and Fernandez were dominating the midfield. Chelsea have so many great options in that double pivot that, they could pick, maybe in Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, maybe in a couple of other players, and they could still do a really good job, better than probably the Spurs side. But not only that, Cucurella, this empty space that I was talking about, he ended up being the one to pick up the space. Badiashile came out to the left-hand side. Cole, while, more on the right-hand side, came a bit more centrally in possession. And that meant that, all of a sudden, Chelsea didn't have these problems, with Badiashile on the right-hand side, being a little bit awkward, the angle not quite being right, his body position being wrong. Gusto was much more that, and also with his legs as well, he was able to get up and down the pitch, which really helped Chelsea going forward. Cole Palmer, did Cole Palmer things. And in the end, Spurs were kind of being overrun again in midfield, this time by a different four, with the Chelsea wingers high and wide. And Ange Postecoglou and Spurs had no answer. They had no answer to this, midfield domination that Chelsea were having. Cucurella was causing all sorts of havoc, sometimes not even on the ball, sometimes just as a decoy because the Spurs man had to go and defend him. And it led to numerous problems. And I think the first word that came to mind when I saw that second half from Chelsea, the way they started, was intensity. They were out there in that second half going, we can win this game, we're going to go for blood, and they did that. But let's be honest, even though I fully expected Chelsea to go on and score many goals and win this game, it was made easy for them by the fact that Spurs just conceded, too many silly errors. And this one, Bissouma on Caicedo, I mean, he ends up losing the ball high up in the pitch on the counter-attack, which is what leads to this Chelsea attack anyway, which I thought were really, really good. But, you're taught very young as a defender, as I'm a defender, not at the same level, as Bissouma in the Premier League, but, you're taught as a defender, stay on your feet, especially in the penalty area. Don't go to ground, because that means that you give the opposition a chance of going down and giving away a penalty. But this isn't even, giving your opposition a chance of going down. This is just taking him out in the penalty area, and this was one of the easiest penalty decisions I've ever seen, because Caicedo is quite clearly going to get that ball. Quite clearly. It's not even, in a shadow of doubt. So why go to ground? Just stand him off and say, you know what, do something, beat me, put a decent ball into the box, I'll challenge you. There's only Nicolas Jackson in that box, and it's just really, really poor. And I do have a little bit of sympathy for Ange Postecoglou, because what are you meant to do about silly individual errors? And at no point does it look like Bissouma's going together. Caicedo has already quite comfortably got to the ball ahead of Bissouma. There is only one thing that's going to happen here, is he's going to get taken down for a penalty, and Cole Palmer is going to convert it, and he did that. And this is the build-up to Chelsea's third goal, and as you can see, on the edge of the D is Marco Correa, with Timo Werner tracking him back, who's meant to be the right winger, and he's just, causing havoc, being a bit of a decoy, but also getting the ball in very dangerous areas. But I think this play, you have to give so much credit to Cole Palmer, because getting a lot of criticism, for not converting and doing the job against the big teams, but, this piece of play was brilliant. It goes one way, then the other, doing a doji in the process, and then he starts running at the Spurs back line. And very similar to, the way Kulusevski, jinked and turned in that first half to make the Spurs second goal. This time it's Cole Palmer, and it was, brilliant play. And I'm going to criticise the Spurs defending here, but not quite just yet, because I think the fact that, Cole Palmer is such a goal threat and he's the main talisman for Chelsea, that he just sucks in so many bodies and everyone's just thinking, oh my god, what's he going to do? We need to stop Cole Palmer. So no one really thinks about everyone else. Look, well, where am I? Look here, right? Enzo Fernandez, edge of the D, absolutely no one mark him. But not only that, look far left, you also got Jadon Sancho in acres of space as well. So Cole Palmer, he ends up, quite luckily, I think a little bit of deflection. I think he goes for the shot in the end, ends up finding Enzo Fernandez. But, at this point, Spurs are all over the place. And it's a great true strike by Enzo Fernandez on his weaker foot. But if I'm being honest, look at Pedro Porro there. I mean, if you're going to put your body on the line, a little bit similar to Chelsea's first goal where I criticised Bissouma and Van de Ven, put your body on the line. At this point, it's 2-2. You could still maybe win the game, get something from it. But it's like a commitment, maybe lack of energy because of the fixtures, and Spurs don't have the squad that Chelsea do. But yeah, I mean, let's not take away anything from Enzo Fernandez, because that's a great strike. And he's really developing in this new role for Chelsea as, one of their best players. And just in case there was any doubt about who was going to go on and win this game, Spurs, just shoot themselves in the foot yet again. This time, Sarr, who makes a challenge with Cole Palmer when he absolutely doesn't need to. Spurs are in a decent position. They've got men back, and Cole Palmer isn't really going anywhere apart from in the corner flag. And despite being nowhere near the ball, and like I said, Cole Palmer running towards the corner flag, he decides to make a challenge. I don't even know what he's going for. The ball is behind me. You can't see it in this photo, but he's nowhere near him. It's just like, if you're going to lash out because of frustration, do it in the middle of the pitch or in the opposition box and, just win a foul in a non-dangerous area. But to do it in, penalty box, there's a time and place. And it's just, yeah, like I said, I have sympathy for Ange, because what are you meant to do? First Bissouma, now Sarr, your two midfielders just being absolute clowns in that middle of the midfield. It was just, horrendous. And Cole Palmer, of course, he does, scores a penalty. And the cheeky Panenka as well. It was really, really good. And, it did demonstrate the amount of confidence that Cole Palmer has at this moment. And, he's one of the best players in the league, hands down. And sure, Spurs do end up getting a consolation third goal to make it a little bit interesting in the last 30 seconds of the game. But as you can tell from this photo, I mean, the stadium's half empty already. Most Spurs fans have gone home because they've seen enough. But, it's well worked by Maddison and Bergvall in this instance because they play the corner short. Chelsea are caught a little bit off guard. And, Maddison does put in a really good cross. And when you see the amount of bodies in that penalty area, the fact that Maddison is able to find Heung-min Son, the one player in a little bit of space, I thought was really, really well worked. And maybe begs the question why Maddison wasn't starting, had a fantastic game against Man City. And if you're going to talk about trying to keep the ball at home and trying to press aggressively, that I think he could have absolutely done that job. But it is a little bit weird because, one good game he plays, the next game he doesn't play. So it's a question for Spurs, but in the end, Chelsea come away with a 4-3 win, and you could see by the Enzo Maresca's reaction they had the full-time whistle that, this meant a lot to him and the Chelsea players. But where does this leave both sides after that game? Well, Spurs, bottom half of the table, roughly 10 to 12 points worse off than they were this time last season. Questions are mounting on Ange, and I do think sometimes fairly so, but I do still just think, if you can beat Man City, if you can beat Aston Villa, but not only just beat them comprehensively, you should be able to go about and, beating everyone else in this league as well. Spurs definitely have the first 11 to be able to go out and, beat anyone they want, but with the constant injuries that they have, I think the third most injuries in the whole league, and Mikel van der Ven and Christian Romero injured yet again in this match. Christian Romero 15 minutes, Van der Ven late in that second half. And also the silly mistakes, Sarr, Basuma for the penalties. What on earth are they doing? You can't legislate for that. You can't, predict that's going to happen, but you just got to take it on the chin. I think that's where I do have a little bit of sympathy for Ange Postecoglou, but at the same time, game state is so important. There are times when they're playing on the edge of the box and I'm just thinking, clear the ball because, Chelsea win the ball back and they end up creating a chance for them, and that could have been a whole much worse. Chelsea could have had a couple more goals just from Spurs' mistakes as well, but yeah, questions mounting for Spurs and Ange. Not quite sacking time for Spurs just yet, but writing does appear to start to be on the ball, and questions are being asked, serious questions as well. Chelsea, much needed the win for them. I think the fact that, they finally beaten their typical top 6 club, I think, will help them really out in terms of mentality going forward. Now second outright in the Premier League table with Arsenal drawing against Fulham. I do think the Chelsea side have the capability to not necessarily win the Premier League, but at least compete for the Premier League and be in a title race. I don't think they will go on to win it, but if you are a Chelsea fan, compared to what you've seen in the last couple of seasons, this must be really, really exciting now. And the fact that Enzo Maresca does, seem to be an astute manager who does, make tactical tweaks, can, nullify the opposition and get the best out of his players as well. Plus the fact that he's got such a young and exciting squad. I think, for all the criticism that we've been given Chelsea for the spending, I think they've done a fantastic job with the squad they've got now. And I think a lot of us are eating our own words, me as well included in that. So, Chelsea fans, let me know what you think in the comments below. Very happy with the win, I'm sure. But what do you think you can go on and achieve this season? Spurs, same question to you. What do you think you can go on and win this season? Because at the moment, it doesn't look too bright. But thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.